calls are continuing across Clare for an increase in the amount of Gardai deployed for duty in the county. It follows on from Justice Minister Jim O'Callaghan visiting here last week, where he heard of safety concerns from local business owners, retailers and elected representatives. This included in Ennistymon, where issues around growing antisocial behaviour problems were raised, along with a recent spate of local car thefts. In Ennis, a deputation of town centre retailers and business owners detailed ongoing challenges to the minister, including persistent antisocial behaviour, the intimidation of customers and indeed rising retail theft as well. Meelick Fianna Fail TD Cathal Crowe is among those calling for increased Garda personnel for Clare, while Fianna Fail councillor Shane Talty was among those who met with the minister in Ennistymon last week. They're both on the line this morning. Good morning to you both. Cathal, if I can start with yourself, I suppose this seems to be an ongoing debate within the county at the moment.
Yeah, we had a very good visit last week. Shane and I organised a meeting back at Ennistymon. We had another one in Ennis with retailers there and councillors were in attendance. Look, the bottom line, and I think you could bring these meetings to any county, the message will be the same. The law-abiding public wants to see far more guards. They want to see them on the beat. They want to feel safe when guards are visible and to be seen in their locality. And that was the message loud and clear to Minister Jim O'Callaghan. Now, I would say about Minister Jim O'Callaghan, he's done quite a good job since he took up the ministry 15 months ago. He's gone back to basics because people want the Minister for Justice to deal with policing, law and order, not getting distracted with other issues. And what we've seen across the last 15 months is many more guards. We're going to get record numbers, hopefully, in the next 12 months or so. But what we want to see is those guards in Clare, because so far Dublin, larger cities have been the beneficiaries. We've around 300 guards, give or take, in Clare at any given time. That can fluctuate, of course, with retirements. We do get some new Garda personnel, but I think essentially, if you're to boil everything down, what Shane, other councillors and members of the public were saying to Jim O'Callaghan last week is that in the next outputs from Templemore College, we certainly want to see an increase for County Clare. And like we've seen policing plans implemented in Limerick, Cork and Dublin recently, high visibility policing plans, we want the likes of Ennis and our other county towns to be beneficiaries of those schemes as well.
And Councillor Talty, you're obviously based in the Ennistymon, the Hinch area, and we know that that's one of the biggest swaths of ground, I suppose, that Gardai have to man within the county. The main station is in Kilrush. Ennistymon is operating, but I don't think on a 24-hour basis. You're basically going from Loophead to Blackhead with a massive ground to cover. Is it any wonder then, I suppose, perhaps that we've seen the kind of increases that you've spoken about in terms of car thefts and all those antisocial behaviour issues?
Morning, Derek. Yeah, as you said, the area to be covered in West and North Clare is vast, and I suppose when you go out into the rural part of it, it's maybe sparsely populated, but still in all, every homeowner and resident of the area deserves to feel safe and secure in their own home or in their town or in their work or in their place of work in the town and villages around here. So I suppose we were delighted, to get the opportunity to at least meet with the Minister and Senior Garda Management from Clare to put across, I think, as Cathal said, very united across the councillors that were present from all parties and the TDs and senators to put across the issues and concerns that we get on a daily basis locally. And as well as that, then we had some business representatives as well to give a flavour of what they've seen in particular in Ennistymon over the last maybe 3 or 4 or 5 months. Which, it's kind of, as I said, maybe low level, but it's just persistent kind of antisocial behaviour, bit of intimidation of staff and business owners in the evening when they're closing up and trying to get out of their premises, and particularly early in the spring and the darker evenings, trying to make their way to their cars and just not feeling entirely comfortable. And I suppose our message to the Minister is that, we need to have some certainty that in those scenarios, if we were to look for help, if you were to put in a call, that a member in a car would be in the locality and able to give assistance and to give that reassurance and visibility. And I suppose our fear is that the resources are just too limited currently to give that across such a large area. And I suppose just really trying to reiterate that point to the Minister. I know the day-to-day policing is a matter for the Commissioner and his management down along, but to make it clear that we need to see more members for Clare. We're obviously not satisfied in Ennistymon, I suppose, with what has been a diminution of services over a long number of years now. At one time we had a superintendent, we had a detective unit. We don't have either of those now, and we're relying largely on a response, for serious crime, we're relying on a response from Ennis. And even for low enough level stuff then locally, our resources are stretched, and at times we find that our resources have actually been taken away from here and maybe brought to respond to other incidents or needs across the county in Ennis, Shannon and beyond.
Yeah, and Cathal, on that, like, you would hear colloquially again people saying that, you know, that the resources for Gardaí are so stretched that is there even a point at times in ringing them? That's what the public tend to feel. So is there also a sense here that perhaps that is reducing confidence a little bit in the Gardaí from a public perspective?
Yeah, well, we heard loud and clear from Superintendent John Ryan, and I must say John Ryan and his team all the way through the rank and file guards, they have my respect, they do fantastic work. But what we heard from the superintendent last week and the minister is that a lot of people have become a little bit blasé about reporting. Now people will say such and such is happening, and they'll tell neighbours on WhatsApp or maybe on Facebook, but that isn't real reporting, that's just chit-chat with neighbours. So the guards need real-time information. They need that rang into their Garda stations. Then we were told at those meetings that the commissioner uses heat mapping, so he can tell at any given time where there's high instances of crime, where there's high instances of reporting, and it's to those areas that resources typically get matched. So the message loud and clear from the minister and superintendent last week was to phone in and to report crime. Now, there is a change in modus operandi, which I suspect quite a number of listeners may not be aware of. Heretofore, if you saw something low level, maybe antisocial behaviour or some shady character moving about your community, you will pick up the phone and ring your local station. But now that modus operandi has changed, we're now being asked to phone 999 or 112. And I know people would typically associate those with, you know, some awful emergency unfolding. But no, we've been told they are the direct lines that we need to phone in these instances. Only then will they properly be responded to. The other thing arising from last week's meetings that I've been pushing and I will continue to raise, the policing of Shannon Airport, of course, is really important. It's an airport dear to all of our hearts in County Clare, but it's a national asset and it must be policed as a national asset. We cannot have the policing numbers, the Garda numbers assigned to Shannon Airport counted within the overall numbers of Clare Garda personnel for the whole county. When you do that, you get a kind of a distorted figure as to how strong the Garda force is in Clare. So I think we need to know that each year going forward, when they do, I guess, a census of how many guards we have available in Clare, that we discount Shannon Airport, that be in a separate column. Only then, I think, will you get those numbers rising up and will you get the true numbers that we want so that you can have active, high visibility policing in our towns and villages.
And Shane, as Cathal outlined there at the start, is maybe a progressive step to take a lot of the paperwork maybe from your rank and file Gardaí and let them be out and about, let them be on the roads, let them be seen, and that presence might be of some comfort then to the people that are, you know, reporting these incidents, as you said, of intimidation and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. The last thing you want is guards sitting at desks, dealing with paperwork or computer work or whatever it is. We need the Gardaí out and available and visible. And for more rural parts of the county, what that means is they need assets, they need vehicles. If there are 2 or 3 members on duty, well then they need 2 or 3 vehicles as well, so that they're actually available to respond. When they're covering vast areas, maybe a third of the landmass of the county, that's not going to be possible without having access to these vehicles all the time, I suppose. And we're hearing it anecdotally from some of the members that are frustrated themselves, that they find that cars can be moved around within the division, and suddenly, you might find yourself in an Ennistymon station and maybe have 2 or 3 guards with only 1 car, or maybe that car then gets called to another part of the county and there's members in the station but there's no car. So there's, those assets need to be there along with the increased Garda numbers. I mean, we very much welcome the commitment to get up near 15,000 members by the end of the year across the country, but it's to see those new members pushed out into the more rural and county towns and the likes of our own area here, rather than just constantly seeing the large percentage going towards the cities. Obviously, there was particular issues in Dublin, let's say a year and a half ago now, and that demanded a greater response in the capital city, and we understand that. But I suppose we need to get to a point where the cities are deemed to be under control and adequately resourced, and ensure then that the more peripheral rural regions get the resources they need. Every area has particular needs, and in North Clare we have there's a large response required to manage incidents that can occur at the Cliffs of Moher and elsewhere, and they take huge time, resources, have a big impact on the members involved, and those kind of things need to be taken into account when allocating numbers as well.
And finally, Cathal, the fact that the Minister was here and saw it for himself and perhaps got a real sense of an on-the-ground need for it, how confident are you that we will see the appropriate action taken?
Yeah, well, you can't beat having a minister in the county. It's very easy for the likes of Timmy, Joe Cooney and Donna Begetting to put questions in the Dáil, but it's all a bit hollow unless the minister is down in the county experiencing things. And the two meetings that I helped to organise, the one in Ennistymon I organised in conjunction with Shane, he met people who live and work and own business in the town, and similarly the one in Ennis, in the Templegate Hotel with the business community, very important. Look, the important things to reflect on here, the numbers are increasing day by day. The last budget and the next budget will allocate money to recruit 1,000 guards. I was very keen to hear from the superintendent that they're going very aggressively in the county to try to recruit and to drive on recruitment. They're running a transition year programme where youngsters are brought in, they experience what the life of a guard is like, and much of that is converting then to actual applications to the force. I'd be confident we're going to get to a high level of guards, to record numbers in fact across the next 12 months nationally. And I guess my job and that of Shane as representatives of the county is to ensure that we get our fair share. Everything has kind of been urban-centric, probably following on from those Dublin riots of 2 years ago, understandably so. But we do need to see it in Clare, and we do need to see that separation of Shannon from the rest of the numbers. Hopefully, as people see more visibility of guards on the streets, it'll deter crime and make our whole county feel a bit safer.
Absolutely, one to certainly keep an eye on. But for this morning, thank you both indeed for joining us here on Morning Focus. That is Clare Fianna Fail TD Cathal Crowe and Ennistymon Fianna Fail councillor Shane Talty.